Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do. To educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade, Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons, and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's show. Today's guest is Forrest Smith, and he's the CEO of Kineon. And am I saying that right, Forrest? Is it Kineon? Kineon?
That's right. Kineon. Either way is good. It was from the Greek for movement.
For the Greek for movement, yeah. And this is the reason why I'm having Forrest on, everybody, is because I'm going to just cue up this story really quick and tell you a little bit about this. You know, as someone who has a podcast, one of the things you know is that you have people oftentimes will send you gear. And so we get a lot of people saying, hey, there's this new product out. Why don't you give it a try? And right away, I was interested in this product because I'm very much into red light therapy, which you're going to hear about here in a minute. And this is a very specific kind of device. But what ended up happening is my brother-in-law, my sister, Jade, is my personal assistant. So she is my sister, and she's also my personal assistant. She works for me. And so the device was sent, Forrest's device was sent to my office where Jody intercepted it. And my brother-in-law has a really bad golfer's elbow, right? And so in case those of you don't know, this is medial epicondylitis, of the elbow, basically. And so it's constant pain and constantly aggravating him. He does a lot with construction. And so this is something so he immediately put the device on. Now, one of the things is I've had lots of red light therapy devices that we have tried, several. I won't name names here, but we've tried several of them, and they really didn't make a difference for him. And to be honest, I wasn't necessarily thinking this one was going to do much either, because we had tried different ones. And this was one of these things where he goes, Jade, my pain after one treatment, he essentially woke up the next day with very little pain, if any pain. He goes, it's almost gone. So that intrigued me right away, Forrest, when that happened, right? And then I said, okay, well, let's just see how it goes. And he's been using this. I guess we've had it for about a month now, and he's been using it, and it's essentially pain-free. And my sister played with it a little bit as well. And my father, who has double frozen shoulders, has not used it yet, but I want him to use it. But the whole family stole this device from me, basically. I have actually not seen it yet. And so there's something going on here. Of course, it's an N of 2 in my family so far, but it's also coming on the tail end of these devices not being that effective in terms of the other ones that I have tried, which then sent me down the rabbit hole, Forrest, to look at you a little bit closer in this device and looking at some of the amazing testimonials you have. And I am incredibly intrigued. And also, what we have today with Forrest is someone who really understands the tech. He's a research nerd, and, so he understands this technology very well. And so I thought, let's have him on. Let's have him educate us on this. And why don't you go ahead, Forrest, and just start us off with, I'm interested from the entrepreneurial perspective, how you even got into this. But I'm also interested in the problem that you have solved here, with specifically wondering, like, why don't some of these other devices work as well as they say they are, and what's going on that's different with yours? And I'll let you just kind of start where you want.
Yeah, you may have noticed a big smile on my face when you were talking about the results, because the first thing I would love to kind of just start on is how we started the company was really my partner and I had both built kind of successful startups before and exited. And at this point in life, we're both in our early 40s and really wanted to start something that was more mission driven than necessarily just commercially driven. And what that came down to, as we tried to refine that over time, was defining our mission as improving the quality of life for the largest number of people we can in the most substantial way we can. And so every time we hear a story about somebody who's had kind of chronic pain of a joint, who, we hear these great stories of people who's, my wife couldn't walk up the stairs for 10 years, and she's moving without pain up and down the stairs now. It's exactly what we started the company for. So I really appreciate the stories. I do feel bad. We'll have to get you another device that has been intercepted there. Get got some NFL cornerbacks in the family, but it's great to hear this being put to good use. And to answer a little bit about how we came to start the company, it really was around the mission. And I my feeling was I spent a lot of time in medical literature. I'm not getting younger. I'm my early 40s now. I'm a CrossFitter. I play competitive rugby, kind of at a city level. I was playing in China at city level, and now playing in Mexico. And that puts a lot of stress and strain on your body, and I don't recover the same as I have been before. And so, because of that, I spend a lot of time in the medical literature trying to find solutions that are scientifically backed, that are worth testing, and then kind of test on myself and go from there. And one of the things that I had been researching as we were looking to start a company that was going to impact people's lives in a positive way was transcranial photobiomodulation, which is essentially light therapy for the brain. And it's a really interesting research space, and we're going to be moving in that direction. I'll probably talk about it a little bit later from a technology standpoint. But the regulatory hurdles for this are extremely high, and there's FDA requirements for it from a pre-market authorization, the PMA, running your own clinical trials. It was going to be a 3 to 5 year launch path, and we wanted to build our team a little bit faster than that and come to market with something that really was going to impact people's lives. And one of the other things that's been kind of a scourge, and I think with the brain device, what we're looking at treating is depression, anxiety. These are things that really impact people's quality of life and have a kind of can create a downward spiral where when you have depression, it's hard to get the energy to go up and fight through that and kind of reverse field. But pain and inflammation are another pathology or set of symptoms from pathologies that really impact people's lives in a negative way and negatively put people in that kind of downward spiral. And so you see depression, as an example, highly correlated with osteoarthritis, because when people stop being able to move, they start having negative impacts from a mental wellness standpoint. So what we chose to move forward with and saw a gap for was treating pain and inflammation with photobiomodulation or light therapy. There were some great clinical level devices in the market. There's a company out of Wisconsin, I believe, called Thor. These guys make clinical level devices, $15,000-$20,000. If you have $15,000 or $20,000 laying around in change in your couch, consider one of their devices. They make really good devices. The only downside for these is, aside from the cost, is that you have to stay plugged into the wall. So they're desktop devices. So our feeling was, with the latest technology coming out with lasers now, we can now reduce the size. There's new types of lasers that are being used for LiDAR and for facial recognition from phones called VCSEL, or vertical cavity surface emission lasers, that are smaller and being produced in such volumes that they're at a lower price point. And we felt that with our dosing models that we've built, we could leverage that to be able to deliver a clinical device from a dosing standpoint that people could use at home. And our target was sub $500, because that's going to be able to allow people to buy it and use it in their home, and then long term reduce the inflammation and pain, and also try to treat some of the underlying conditions. And with things like osteoarthritis, where you have chronic inflammation, there's a degradation of tissue in the joint that really is hard to reverse. You have this kind of homeostasis of, or you should have this homeostasis of cartilage production, which is a very slow tissue to grow, and then cartilage degradation. And when you have osteoarthritis or chronic inflammation, that degradation is sped up by having these inflammatory molecules in your synovial fluid. Well, it doesn't also speed up your rate of growth. So what you're doing is just wearing down that cartilage over time. one of the benefits of photobiomodulation is you actually address both sides of that homeostasis. So you increase the rate of osteoblasts and chondroblast proliferation, which are the fast-growing cells that actually start turning into cartilage over time, and you decrease that inflammatory load in the synovial fluid. And so you balance this out and allow people to kind of regrow. At some point, you can kind of bring that inflammation down and the chondroblast proliferation up enough to be able to regrow cartilage, and that's what we've seen, particularly paired with some other treatment modalities like PRP and stem cells.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Let me try to translate some of this, and if I get it wrong, just correct me, Forrest, for the listeners. So you guys hear Forrest talking about photobiomodulation. So this is synonymous with red light therapy. So you probably heard. So photobiomodulation, for those of us who like to read the research, this is typically what it's called in the research. And the other thing that Forrest is pointing out that I think is really critical to understand, and it has implications for what a lot of people would do, is this idea of the joints and joint issues. This is a very, very poorly perfused area, meaning not a whole lot of blood supply gets into this area. And so once it starts to get inflamed or get damaged, it is difficult for it to recover. And oftentimes one of the best things for that is movement. But when you're in pain, you can't move. And then what do people do? Most of you listening to this, you're going to take some kind of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. And as Forrest was, and this would be aspirins, this is Tylenol, or not Tylenol rather, but Advil, Aleve, these kinds of things. And what Forrest was alluding to here is that many of you may not know, and you may want to add something to this, Forrest, but I just want to get people sort of understanding is when you take these non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, one of the things you can do is you can decrease pain. They're very good at that. You also further slow down collagen production. These chondroblasts, these are the cells that sort of blast the collagen back together, so to speak, and help to repair the joint. What many people are doing when they're under pain is they stop moving and they start taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and they disrupt this whole process. And so photobiomodulation or red light therapy seems to have an impact of doing what Advil and Aleve can do, decreasing some of this inflammation to get you back moving, but more importantly, also at the same time, cause healing in the area. And this is a powerful 1-2 punch. Now, the next question I have for you, Forrest, is I also got excited about this research in this area in multiple domains when I first started seeing it. And so a lot of us went out and bought photobiomodulation, red light therapy devices, seeing if they can do what they said they do. And most of them, simply from a clinical perspective, speaking from my clinical experience, did not do what they said they could do. You know, the pain was not decreased enough. It was iffy at best. And you've done something, and I think if I'm hearing you right, you've addressed this with lasers, which, if I'm understanding correctly, most of these devices are not using that. So walk me through, am I right on that? And correct me if I got any of that stuff wrong. And I just want you to pick up and help us understand, how come this one is perhaps so different? What did you do differently here that is perhaps explaining why this is effective the way it is compared to these other devices?
It's a great question, and it actually takes us back into our early days of kind of product development with this, which is our assumption for making the device effective is that the current methodologies of so one thing to explain first, dosing is key for light therapy. What we're doing with this light therapy is we are targeting and triggering receptor molecules or photoacceptors at different levels of the tissue. And so you have different things that we're interacting with different wavelengths of light, and we need those wavelengths of light to be able to access and trigger those reservoirs of photoacceptors at different depths of tissue. So when we started building our devices, when we started designing our devices, the commercial devices in the market typically use things that use metrics from a measurement standpoint that are engineering based. There are irradiance, power density, things like this. Essentially, measurements of how much power is coming out at this point, or how much power is hitting the skin at this point, which is at best kind of a rough heuristic for a measurement of what you're actually triggering from a physiological standpoint. So what we've done, and we started off in the same way, it's not a bad way to start, but what we've tried to do is advance that some. And we started off with the same way everybody else does, is how do we measure what these output levels are and what the power levels are at the skin level. What we've had to get to is designing our own mathematical models, which is, tens of thousands of really kind of highly specialized, tens of thousands of hours of highly specialized time into building these models and then testing them versus our outcomes. And what we're essentially doing with those is getting, instead of saying how much power in milliwatts per centimeter are we delivering at the skin, we're saying how many photons are we delivering to this type of molecule at this depth of tissue, because we have to do the math on how this light distributes through that tissue, and then calculate out the probabilities of us delivering the correct amount of dosage to the correct photoacceptors. And when you do that, then you can actually say, now we can promise an outcome. This is something we've had to do all the math on the back end, and now we can design a device that's going to deliver that at the correct level of dosage, and we can promise an outcome because we know what we're triggering molecularly from a signaling standpoint within the body. And I think one of the points, as a kind of illustration of that, that you made was, a lot of times with joints, we're not delivering enough blood into the area, and we definitely see that not just with joints, but there's an amazing couple of pictures I'll have to send you from. We've been working with professional athletes, and these guys really push their bodies. Professional CrossFitters, NFL players, but they push their bodies to the margins of what a human can do, and they're working through small injuries all the time. And so, what we found is, in when we test them, if they have micro tear in a back muscle, that area in the back will have a cold pool of tissue around it, because what happens is, as you damage that tissue, as you have traumatic injury to the tissue, the inflammation in the area increases, and when you have that inflammation trickling out of the area, it can become chronic, and many of them do. And when it's chronic, it impacts the blood delivery system from your capillaries, and you can see this like circle around the torn muscle, where it's 1 to 2 degrees colder than the tissue around it, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is from a healing. And it's one of the reasons why you see people have injuries that kind of re-trigger themselves and are repetitive over time. And that's not just short term. This is something where we've seen NFL players, and there was a very good study on this, kind of that we did some work on the back of. Around 5,000 NFL players, torn ACLs. Half of them had torn ACLs, half of them had not. And this was 5 to 10 years after they had retired, where the observational study was put together. Their quads, on the leg where they'd had the injury, where they had the traumatic damage to that knee tissue, and the surgery to repair it, their quads on that leg were 2 to 3 degrees colder than their quads on their other leg. So they're still 10 years later not delivering blood. They're still having that inflammation regionally, not just locally, regionally impact the blood delivery. So it's something where, by triggering blood in that area, one of the things we target as a photoacceptor is hemoglobin. The heme core is a good photoacceptor for infrared. When we trigger those hemoglobin with infrared, we reduce the affinity of nitric oxide for this hemoglobin. So it dumps nitric oxide into this area, which expands the blood vessels. We also dump something called S-nitrous thiol into the area, which actually teaches your endothelial tissue how to manage it, regulate itself again as well, so that you can actually, within 4 to 6 weeks, your body can actually do this itself. But it also, oxygen and nitric oxide are competitive for that binding site on hemoglobin. So when nitric oxide dumps off and goes into the blood and increases the size of these capillaries and allows more blood flow through, you actually also attach more oxygen to those hemoglobin molecules. And so you have this double kind of synergistic impact, where you're starting to deliver a lot more oxygen to the area. And what we've seen from our observational studies is that it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to train that tissue to operate in a healthy way again. And if you're not doing it, it's going to be there for decades. But if you do this, you can actually fix it quite quickly.
Hey, everybody, jumping into the show real quick to talk about one of our sponsors. This is one of my favorite sponsors. You've heard about it AG1 by Athletic Greens. Now, why do I love this product so much? Well, first of all, one of the things that I was doing prior to AG1 was I was doing a multivitamin. I was doing a probiotic. I was taking a fiber supplement. I was taking adaptogens, and I was taking a greens drink. And of course, I take other supplements. But AG1, one of the things that's so powerful about this greens product is that it is a multivitamin, prebiotic, probiotic. It has adaptogens in it, and it acts as my greens drink. So when I started taking this, I had 5 supplements that I could essentially get rid of just for this one. So there were a lot of savings there. But the other thing about this product, and many of you know this about me, is I am not somebody, unfortunately, and I know I'm in the health and fitness space, and it's kind of embarrassing to say, but I'm not somebody who loves vegetables. I don't always get my greens in. And so I want the extra assurance of all those polyphenols and all those plant chemicals that really bioflavonoids and all the rest that really bring health benefits to us. And these things are loaded in AG1. And so I add this into my water. And believe it or not, I add it into my protein shakes as well because it has such a neutral flavor. And one of the reasons I started using AG1, just as a reminder, is other greens drinks that use tapioca starch and things like that will elevate my blood sugars. Now, AG1 does not do that. And it's got this very neutral flavor, so I can stick it in my protein shakes and take it in water as well. The other thing I love about AG1 is they're fanatical about testing. They are NSF certified. That's the National Sanitation Foundation. And they test for heavy metals. They test for persistent organic pollutants. They test for all other harmful chemicals of industry. And here's the thing. The fact of the matter is this testing is not cheap. And so a lot of people don't do this. And if you think you are safe, just go to consumerlabs.com or any of these organizations that are testing products, and you will find out pretty quickly that a lot of these products that we think we are doing something good for our health with are not testing, and you're having heavy metals, persistent organic pollutants, forever chemicals showing up in them. You know, AG1 is on their 52nd integration of this product. So they continue to innovate, they continue to tweak, they continue to make it better. It is an excessively clean product through this testing and this constant sort of reintegration and making this product better. And so I cannot recommend this product strongly enough. This is one of the ones that I think every single person should get and be taking every single day. Like I said, it's got multiple benefits. And so to make it easy for you, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of an immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/next level. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/next level to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, let's get back to the show. Yeah, it's interesting. And I'll just repeat some of this stuff and again, correct me if I get this wrong, but it sounds like, when we think of inflammation, right, we think of increased blood flow, increased pain, increased swelling, all of this kind of stuff. That's acutely. So it looks like, what one of the things Forrest is pointing out to us is that chronic inflammation actually can have the opposite effect, especially in these tissues that may not be well perfused with blood to begin with. So that's sort of the first thing it sounds like you are telling us. And then this device, it sounds like you have done your work in terms of depth of penetration and for people who don't know this, when we talk red light therapy, we're talking different wavelengths, somewhere like, normally we talk about, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Forrest, but we talk about superficial, maybe in the 600 nanometer, 650 area, and then deeper infrareds in the 800 nanometer. And I know this device, a lot of devices only deliver one or the other. I know from kind of looking briefly at you're delivering multiple wavelengths, both of these. And so you're getting this depth. You're also seeming to use lasers so you can target it. And it looks like you're also paying very close attention to what, sort of molecules are, resonating with this light, from mitochondria, which I want to hear a little bit about if that's something you're doing, to hemoglobin, to other things. And the end result of that is the fact that we are getting increased blood flow, decreased inflammation, increased activity of some of these healing, compounds into this area, and training it to begin to function normally again, simply with red light therapy. So did I get anything wrong there? And then my follow-up question would be, what other things are we addressing here? Because nitric oxide obviously is, to me, one of the most powerful things. It's something men should be interested in because it's very highly regulated in erections and things like that. It's also fantastic for modulating blood pressure, partly because what it does, dilating these blood vessels. What other compounds have you seen, if any, that are being activated? Because I know that mitochondria are also, the powerhouse of the cell. They're also very light sensitive and triggered by red light. There's an awful lot of research on that. And so I'm wondering what, if anything, you can share in that regard.
Absolutely. So it's another binding site. So you look at oxidative phosphorylation chain, which is this chain of kind of essentially this factory. So your mitochondria are the factory of your cells and provide the energy currency or the energy substrate for your body, ATP. There's a couple of ways that happens. You can do it by processing fatty acids, but you can also do it within your oxidative phosphorylation chain, which is kind of the larger and more robust system for creating ATP in your body. One of the phases of this where you're this and these the oxidative phosphorylation chain is essentially a number of processing points that are embedded in the kind of phospholipid bilayer of the mitochondria. So it's kind of the outer shell of the mitochondria has these different energy processing steps. One of these embedding points includes a molecule called cytochrome C oxidase, which is another one where you have oxygen and nitric oxide being competitive. It's also another one where when you can target this heme core that it has, you can reduce the affinity of nitric oxide for this site and allow it to process energy more efficiently by binding oxygen back into that. And so there's a couple of things that happen there. One is that cytochrome C oxidase, which can increase the efficiency of energy production from your oxidative phosphorylation chain. The other one, and this is more recent in the literature, is the exclusion zone. So infrared light actually impacts water as well, and it can make the water more viscous. And one of the things that slows down energy production around your mitochondria is reducing that viscosity. When you're producing energy, there are different molecules that can build up outside of the mitochondria, and there's what's called an exclusion zone, which is particularly well targeted by the infrared that we're using, the 808 nanometer infrared, which does increase the viscosity of this. So essentially, it ungums the works of your mitochondria, and so as you're pushing some of these hydrogen back out from your mitochondria, you can kind of gum that up, and that becomes a bottleneck for energy production. One of the things that we do to be able to increase that energy production as well is ungum that area, so increase the viscosity so that these can flow back into the rest of the cell more effectively, and that's in addition to the downstream signaling. So one of the things that's really amazing about the human body is whenever you're changing anything in these systems, it impacts a number of different things downstream from a signaling process. So most molecules are not just operating the function that they're operating as their kind of core function. They're also indicating or signaling what level they are in the system. And so when you start making these changes from an energy production standpoint, you start seeing some really powerful signaling between the mitochondria and the nucleus, and reducing downstream oxidative stress as well. And so this is sorry, it's a lot. It's a very big rabbit hole. So I just want to stop there for a second.
Let me see. Let me just repeat, sort of what you're saying. Also, just so Now I think hopefully the listener is understanding why I am so excited about this. So one of the things that's really interesting about what Forrest is walking us through is this exclusion zone is a really interesting area of research, and it expands with light, specific light, and it really expands with infrared. And this is again what gets me excited about Forrest's background and Kineon and what they're doing, because this area, you can kind of think of this exclusion zone. They call it the fourth phase of water, right? So you have vapor, you have ice, you have liquid, and then you have this fourth phase that builds up around membranes, like the mitochondria and this kind of stuff. And this creates a battery charge because it tends to be more negative, which creates this charge between the mitochondria and or the cell, which dramatically influences energy production, which if you have an injury in a joint, like the shoulder or something like that, you want this increased energy production. And we now understand, and by the way, this is cutting edge science that is really excited that, that you all are doing this, that, it's really working at the level of physics in a sense, quantum physics. You kind of started to get into that as well here. And this exclusion zone of water is sort of like a battery, and it enhances the energy production that can happen within the mitochondria in multiple ways. And so to translate this, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Forrest, here, but essentially what Forrest is saying is that this light is an independent source. We usually think of food as being like the only source of energy, but this light that we're delivering into these tissues is in a sense an independent source of energy, making the energy production much more efficient than it would otherwise be, which when you can do that, you can heal these tissues. And if you can't do that, these tissues don't heal. And the current thing that we are, doing here is we're like, well, I can't move it, so I'm just going to keep myself out of pain and I'm going to take pain medications. These things cannot heal the tissue in the way light can heal the tissue. And the problem I think, this Kineon has solved is very specific targeting of these areas in a way to get this light penetrating deep enough to impact the heme molecules, to impact this exclusion zone, to impact mitochondria. And you're essentially having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different mechanisms that this light is, making use of to heal these tissues. And I do want to heal, if I'm right there, Forrest, correct me if I'm wrong in any place, but then I do want to hear about, the laser tech. And then I want to get into some of the other stuff that I know you all are doing at your company that goes beyond just joints.
Absolutely. So that was exactly right, and really well and succinctly put. I wish I had the ability to do the same thing. I tend to get a little wordy about it, but that was a great summary. That's so the lasers and the lasers is actually key for this. We when we designed the product first, we really wanted to exclude the lasers because it makes it a much longer regulatory path, more expensive. You have to go through extra hoops with the FDA. And it's a more sophisticated design from an electrical engineering standpoint. And so if we could have excluded the lasers, we would have. But from a dosing model, there's a couple of things about laser light that make it more effective for penetrating to the internal tissue. So we actually do use LEDs for our red light, but we use LEDs that we use a primary optic to control those down to 30-degree emission angle, and that actually is our treatment for some of the more surface tissue. But for the internal tissue, we've used lasers because of the collimation of the light. So the lasers that we're using are called vertical cavity surface emission lasers, and they've really just kind of come into large scale production in the last 3 to 4 years because of LiDAR, because they're needed for being able to help create LiDAR systems for autonomous cars, and they're also being included in facial recognition on cell phones. And so what we assumed was by being adopted by these two industries, the volumes would increase enough to be able to drop the price to help us keep our devices below a $500 point, which was our kind of tipping point for being non-clinical and actually being able to get this in people's hands to adopt. And our mission as a company is to increase the quality of life for the largest number of people we can in the most substantial way we can. And we use that as a kind of a North Star for all of our product design, go-to-market plans, pricing, everything. And so when we found that we can actually meet these pricing requirements that we've set by way of including these VXL lasers, it opened a lot of doors for us. It increased the regulatory costs and the time to market, but it was the right thing to do for our users because that's going to move the needle more substantially for them from an outcome standpoint. And so to talk a little bit about the lasers emit light in an elliptical pattern. So essentially 10 degrees by 20 degrees, but it's collimated. So where LEDs, even with a 30-degree angle, emit in a what's called a Lambertian pattern, which is essentially their chips emit in all angles, but the cups that they're packaged into pull them back to 120 degrees, and our primary optic pulls that back to 30 degrees. They're still spreading like this, and so it's when you're trying to target tissue like synovial fluid or joint tissue or internal soft tissue like tendons, like for patellar tendonitis, Achilles, these type of things require some level of penetration that we can't really achieve effectively with the LEDs because it spreads versus being collimated and penetrating direct in. So that's a decision we made from a design standpoint was this is going to cost us more. We're going to find the way we can to integrate the most cost-effective way that we can still bring this into people's homes. And it's worked out for us long term. That's actually been a good decision. And I think our dosing models were very clear. If we don't do this, we're not going to be able to deliver the same level of outcomes for our patients. And so it's a cost and a complexity that we had to take on, but it's been much more effective for us and for our users because of that.
It's time for one of our sponsors, and this sponsor is a very exciting one and a new one, Timeline Nutrition and their supplement MitoPure. Now, if I was going to ask you what is the most important aspect of metabolism, the mitochondria would have to be tops on your list. The mitochondria are the little energy producing factories inside every single one of your cells. They take the end products of the food we eat, they break them down into cellular ATP and provide energy for the entire metabolism. And these mitochondria, if they are healthy and acting appropriately, can keep us looking good, feeling good, living longer, and functioning better. However, when they are not at optimal function, when they are burning energy in a dirty fashion, when they are damaged, they actually speed cellular aging. They speed up the aging process. We end up suffering from things like fatigue. We end up having all manner of dysfunctions, including weight loss resistance and other issues around weight loss. The mitochondria are the most important elements for the metabolism to function optimally, lose weight, age appropriately, etc. In this compound, MitoPure, that Timeline Nutrition has developed, there is a product called urolithin A. Now, urolithin A is an interesting compound because it is a postbiotic. Now, what does that mean? A postbiotic is a compound that is made from the bacteria in the gut. And so when you eat things like pomegranates, strawberries, walnuts, things with polyphenols like this, they go into the digestive tract, your gut bacteria start working on them, and they can create compounds. Urolithin A is one compound that is in the MitoPure product. It naturally occurs in nature from this bacteria in our gut that break down the polyphenols from primarily foods like pomegranates, strawberries, etc. And it can increase mitophagy in mitochondria. So you might say, well, Jade, what is mitophagy? Mitophagy is the ability for mitochondria to repair and regenerate and recycle their proteins and to stay healthy and functional and de-age. When we can stimulate mitophagy, we can keep our mitochondria functioning efficiently. We can decrease aging. We can increase energy. We can improve our ability to lose weight, function optimally, and stave off diseases of aging. This is what Timeline Nutrition has done with their MitoPure product and the urolithin A that is in it. This is a very exciting area of research. We have not had the ability to support the mitochondria in the way that we do now with this particular product. You definitely are going to want to check this out. I've been taking the product for several months now. It is one of these products that I really, really strongly recommend. To get the product MitoPure, all you have to do is go to timelinenutrition.com/next level. timelinenutrition.com/next level. And let's get back to the show. Yeah. And the way I like to think about this for the listener, if you've ever been outside at night and you see these street lights and they kind of, cast this pattern, this dispersion pattern on the ground. It's a wide sort of dispersion pattern versus if you have one of these very powerful, sort of flashlights that can have this very particular sort of angle. To me, I see it like that. And I'm wondering, Forrest, if that's the reason, because that's the first thing that came to mind for me. I certainly used red light therapy. I've used lasers, in my clinical experience. And one of the ways I've always described it to my patients is that, it's basically a street light versus a very, strong flashlight. Flashlight is creating this very pinpoint, sort of more accurate sort of direction. And because of that, there's more light going into an area and it can penetrate deeper versus being dispersed. And I think a lot of these red light therapy things, or at least this is my, sort of, I'm asking the expert here, but I feel like a lot of the red light therapy devices are essentially using street lights versus flashlights. And so the street lights cannot penetrate as deeply as these pinpoint flashlights. And you are using both because, yes, the street light sort of has some benefits in superficial tissue, but in order to get deep down into the joint where we need to be healed, these other devices really aren't reaching them. And you need that pinpoint flashlight. And that's what the lasers are doing in my mind. Is that kind of how you figured this when you were putting this device together?
Yeah, that's 100% right. That's exactly it. And it's also worth noting that one of the things and we try not to knock other people's devices, but just as a note for the kind of street light analogy, if you think about the red light panels in the market, there's the emission pattern that you have out of these. If you're holding a street light, a red light panel onto your body, then you might be able to find some level of consistent dosing because the emission pattern is going to be the same. And if you can dial it in there, if you have a good dosing model and can dial in exactly the right dosing for that when it's set on your body, then it could potentially give you kind of the peak of that dosing outcome. What we're finding, though, is that most people are standing in front of these and not really realizing that 2 inches forward or 2 inches back makes a massive difference in the dosing, even at the outside superficial levels. If you're using this for collagen for reducing wrinkles, if you're using it for wound healing because you have a cut, if you're using it for kind of increased collagen production just from a skin level, those are effective. The panels can be effective, but even then, the dosing is still kind of a crapshoot. It's almost like going to your doctor and getting a bottle of pills, and he says, "Yeah, instead of taking one, just shake the bottle in front of your face from 2 feet away, and whatever falls in your mouth, try that." The dosing is just not consistent, and it's one of the reasons why you don't see them used in ongoing medical trials, is because you can't really promise or measure anything consistently with that. So. Without without knocking other people's products too much, there are some questions as to we want to see people having a good experience with this because we feel like it's an alternative to pharmaceuticals. When they say I've tried red light therapy because I've used this panel, it's hard to address that without going fully into it from a science standpoint, and it does kind of turn people off of this as a potential alternative for real pharmaceutical kind of relief from a pain and inflammation standpoint.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I agree with that, and it does make, and that's why I was so interested in talking to you, and also why this discussion needs to get a bit technical, because I don't think the listener quite understands. We take for granted that, oh, well, this is a product, they must have done their homework, and they, but that's not always the case when you're sort of in this field. So let's talk about a couple things that are a little bit more fun. I know you like to nerd out, and I know that your company is not just, this is the first of many products that will be coming from you all, it sounds like. One thing that, I'm wondering about, and this is just me asking someone who's, in the space of photobiomodulation. One of the things that I was excited about probably 2 years ago now, or, is the eye studies that basically look at red light therapy in the eye and correcting some aspects of vision. We obviously know that the rods and the cones and the eye is very sensitive to light, obviously, probably the most sensitive light. And there's this red light therapy is doing, some healing, some things in the eye as well. I'm just wondering, do you know anything about that? Is your company doing anything about that? Do you have any plans to do anything about that, and how you see some of that research? Because this is going to get us into sort of the brain stuff that you mentioned. That, I think if you had your druthers may have been the first product that you did, but you decided on this particular product. So I'm just curious to educate myself and the listener. Like, there's a lot coming with photobiomodulation, and we have an expert here. So I thought I would ask if you know anything about that.
Absolutely. There's some great research. Actually, my old university, Georgia Tech, they have some very good research going on with optogenetics and eye treatments. One of the ones that's happening right now that's very exciting, and again, this is a very reputable company out of the U.S. called Thor. They actually, there's a spinoff of theirs. I've forgotten the name of the company. It'll come to me shortly, but they have a product now for macular degeneration, and this is something that causes people to go blind, and not a small number of people. Like, it's a widespread issue, and these guys have really spent a lot of time and clinical manpower to go solve macular degeneration. So you see these really powerful people are going blind. This is going to stop tens of thousands, if not more, people from going blind every year with this adoption. And so it's such an exciting time to be in the space. But you're right that for us, the holy grail, and I think, with people who are in a health optimization or kind of lifestyle health and wellness optimization space, one of the highest leverage points for that is your brain. And for me, this was the product that I really wanted to launch our company with. Was they call it transcranial photobiomodulation product. And there's a number of positive outcomes that have come up and have been expanded on from a medical trial standpoint. So they start with animals, typically animal models, and they go into small scale human models, and they're working into a much larger scale human models on transcranial photobiomodulation for anxiety and depression. This is something that we're going to be working on long term. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, this is completely in line with our mission. Our mission is to move the quality of life needle in the most positive way we can for the largest number of people we can. And when you think about how much impact depression and anxiety have on people's quality of life, particularly when we've seen that ramp up over COVID, the negative impacts of that are not only massive, but they can be compounding over time. So we're super excited to get into that. We've got a great team started on it. We're actually doing an equity raise. We're going to be selling shares in our company, 15% of our company, this summer. So if any of your listeners are interested in supporting alternatives to pharmaceutical solutions in the space, we are developing a brain product which will be launched next year, and we're going to be working on mental wellness solutions out of that. But one of the things that we found, and just to dive into it a touch, because it's a super exciting research space, and I think you'll like this as well. What we found, both ourselves and in just the general medical literature, is that many of these pathologies, these neurological pathologies, have a metabolic component. And so the metabolism, how metabolism works in your brain is a little bit different than it is for the rest of your body, because it's something where if you can't really, you could have sections of your muscles stop working for a period of time or slow down for a period of time. You can't really have that happen to your brain. So there's a number of things that are different in your brain. But one of the key findings over the past 5 years from our perspective as a company is that these pathologies like anxiety, ADHD, depression, and even different forms of dementia have a metabolic component. And as we were talking about earlier, one of the things that we impact with our technology is mitochondria and how metabolism works and how it can bottleneck in different areas of your body. And so what we feel is going to be the key for this is being able to measure in your brain where that metabolism is impacted or is suboptimal and being able to treat that and then remeasure with a time sequence that's not, it can't be a blood measurement. It's got to be something that you can kind of measure continuously. So these time sequenced measurements are really right now only possible either electrically, where they are not effective in the feedback loop they provide you, or with new optical techniques. And that's where we live, is in this optical measurement standpoint of optical tomography and functional near-infrared spectroscopy, or FNIRS, really provide two amazing tools to paint a better picture of how metabolism is impacted in your brain, and what we can do and what we are doing to improve that. And so, as a short kind of taster for that, there are some direct measurements in your brain. We talked about cytochrome C oxidase being one of the molecules that we can impact directly with infrared light. We can also measure and derive the efficacy of cytochrome C oxidase and use that as a metric for how effective your mitochondria are, or ineffective your metabolic rate is in different parts of your brain. So we can make a topographical map of your brain and we measure directly hemoglobin, total hemoglobin, oxygenated and deoxygenated hemoglobin. And because those binding sites, like we were talking about earlier, with nitric oxide and oxygen are competitive, we can also derive from that how effective the cytochrome C oxidase is in its use of oxygen in that space. And so what that allows us to do is say, here's your picture before we start any treatment. Here's our treatment coming in, and then here's your picture as we start treating through this, and how your metabolism is getting better. And this is groundbreaking. This is something that's going to impact our lives. We're so excited about it. You can probably tell, but like it's been powerful for us, and the stories we hear back from people about how their inflammation and pain has gone down and that's changed their life has been very, very powerful. It's our mission. It's what we do on a daily basis, and it's what keeps our team at work and motivated and kind of in the space and happy of delivering this type of product. But when you can start impacting people's brains in this way, the leverage point is just that much higher. It's for me, it's kind of a 10x gain, and we're in early days of our testing right now. But it's such a powerful tool that you can, like I said, you can see how excited I am about it, and our team is even more so.
Yeah, Forrest, I mean, not only are you excited about it, I'm incredibly excited about this, because this is going to be, like we have measurements. You and I were kind of talking about this offline. We have some measurements now that, people who wear Aura rings and things like that, you can get heart rate variability, you can get heart rate recovery, you can get some of these things, you can get temperature. But this is a whole other level of real time. We're measuring dysfunction. We are putting a pinpoint treatment in, and we're measuring healing in response. And it brings to mind for me that this is a way that we can begin to look at not just the light treatments, but we can look at all the other things that we're doing to see how they are impacting these things. And so it is treatment, it is prevention, it is also giving us a window into our individual metabolism, which I speak about a lot. And so it's another reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because it's just a fascinating area. And when you can start to help people get rid of their joint pain, and you can start getting people, because, the metabolism, people go, the metabolism does not live in the thyroid gland. It lives in the brain. Like that's the hypothalamus is where the command and control center is. If you can begin to, target the brain in this way and begin healing the brain's ability to produce and deliver its own energy, you're going to be able to do a lot of downstream effects. And so it's incredibly exciting. Let me, as we begin to wrap up here, I just want to allow you to, what else is on the, sort of radar for you? What are you excited about? I know this brain device is coming out, next year. I know that's a big deal for you. What other things, how can people get involved with the company? And what other things are you really excited about, or you want to make sure the listener understands about this technology and what your company's trying to do?
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Two big, really kind of close to our heart events this summer. One is we're doing this crowdfunding raise. We felt like we had investors come in and really want to work with us, but we felt strongly that having a community own part of the company is the right way to go. Our community has really supported us through our launch, and when people, again, it comes back to our mission. When people have this change in their quality of life from being able to remove that chronic pain, when they can sleep for the first time in 10 years, that's something that they want to support. And we really want to be able to include the community in what we're doing, because it provides also a feedback loop for us to be able to improve the product to make something world-class and gold standard based on what they tell us. And we really trust and rely on our community a lot for that. So we're going to be launching our equity crowdfunding release on Start Engine, and I'll send you some details and links for that in case your audience is interested in supporting. And then the other thing that's very exciting for us is we have a gut biome product. We've talked a little bit about this offline, but the gut is really a center of so many things from a health and wellness standpoint, and we're pairing that with a vagus nerve treatment product as well, because the gut really and the vagus nerve and how it translates back into the brain is really kind of a first step into a couple of things that we were just talking about with the brain products, which is metabolic health, increased dopamine production. A lot of your dopamine is produced in your gut, managing your sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system. So kind of keeping yourself in a healthy mind state. And all of that really comes back to our core mission as well. And our technology is really, really effective at delivering those results. And so we've been tinkering with that product for the last year. We're on our beta versions of this. I'd love to get you one of the betas out as well, just so you can play with it too. Hopefully it doesn't get intercepted. But it's going to be an exciting launch in August as well. So that'll be an Indiegogo launch. Indiegogo helped us build our community and has been really supportive. So we're launching that on Indiegogo in August as well.
Wow, Forrest, you guys are doing such cool things, man. And like part of the Next Level Human podcast is all about individuals who are growing themselves, enriching, others, and evolving the world. And I'm really glad that you and I had the chance to connect. You're just brilliant. What you're doing is incredibly cool. And I just want to thank you for your work, and definitely get me those links, because I'll share them in the show notes as well. But thank you so much. And let us know. Or I don't know if you're on, if you do social media and things like that, but where can people, if people want to follow up with Forrest and kind of dig you and want to learn more about what you're into, is there a place where they can find you? Or is it just sending them back to, I know it's Kineon.io, right, is the website so Kineon.io for those of you who want to check out the website of Forrest's company. But how can they potentially keep up with you as well if you have, and I want to selfishly, I want to follow you too, man, and be able to keep up with you.
Absolutely. So we're at Kineon_labs on Instagram. I'm also on Instagram as Smith Forresto. So it's a bit of a long story, but I'm based in Mexico now. I was based in China for almost 20 years, speak, read, write fluent Chinese, ran my last few businesses in Chinese. I'm now in Mexico, and my Instagram is Smith Forresto. So I'll send it over to you as well. And we will be following up with both Kineon and my personal side on a lot of this. We're doing a lot of, again, testing, and if it's of interest, we're also open to, if you have any thoughts on different types of tests. I think you spend so much time in this space as well, and you have such a great view on the general health optimization kind of space that if there's anything that you'd like to test with this, we're super open to that too.
Yeah, I'm excited about future sort of projects with you. What you guys are doing is incredibly cool. But anyway, why don't you stay on the line for us, just because I want to make sure this uploads. But for all you listeners, I hope this was enjoyable for you. It certainly was for me. And make sure you check out Kineon.io. And thank you, Forrest. And I'll talk to you guys at the next show. You have been listening to the Next Level Human podcast with Dr. Jade Teta. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe and consider leaving a review. You make the biggest difference when you pass on your lessons and inspire others. That's why reviews like this are so powerful. Your words may be the only ones that resonate for someone else. Please remember the information in this podcast is for educational purposes only. Always consult your personal physician or therapist before making any lifestyle changes. And finally, thank you for who you are in the world and the difference you make.